I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to Creek Devil. We have Carol joining us for another update from Missouri. For those who, and I can't remember, sorry folks, which episode she was on previously, but I'll see if I can find that and post it on our Facebook page. So, Carol, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So
how are you all doing?
We're good. You sent me some stuff. You've got some things that have been going on there. You want to tell us about it?
Well, yes. My mom and I had just to kind of, I feel like I should kind of put in explanation for someone
go right
that
ahead.
hasn't heard before. I grew up in Kansas City, and my mom and I moved to a small town, and we lived in the country. And whenever we looked at this piece of property, it was just what we wanted. It was off to itself. There weren't very many people around, had a lot of woods, and it was just what we really felt at peace. We thought it would be exactly what we were wanting. We'd been in the city for 30-some years, and we didn't want people up in our face, and we'd had enough of living close to downtown Kansas City. And so we got that property around, we looked at it about 1990, and I'm kind of sketchy on the time because my grandmother had cancer, and we were moving her things and trying to make decisions with her, and she was going back and forth for treatment and had to have someone to take her for treatment and so forth. So what this ended up being is my aunt and my mother switched off back and forth taking care of her for a large amount of the time. That left me down at our property in a mobile home. And that way I was there, I was able to kind of take care of things. We were still trying to do some things around that property because we still had to dispose of our Kansas City property. And so all of this was taking place at the time. What you were talking about how the animals act whenever Bigfoot are around, I've seen that because when we got the property, someone else had horses on it, and he left 2 of the horses behind, and later eventually came back and got 1 horse. He had 1 little trailer, and I'm assuming he was going to come back for his other horse. And I noticed while I was there, the horses would get spooked, and they would stay up around as close as they could get to where I was living on it. Because I was kind of living toward the front. We had an area cleared, big enough for the trailer and for side yards on either side. And that part was fenced off when we got it. So we had a south pasture, and the horses were in the south pasture because it had a good pond. Then the rest of it, they had let it go, and it had grown up. So just consider the whole rest of the property, other than the south pasture, is in trees, and you'll get a good idea of what this property looked like. My nephew has it now, and he's only coming down to do just the whatever maintenance he can do and that kind of thing. And most of the time he doesn't tell me he's coming down, and he'll just come down on the weekend. He's still got a job. He's still got other houses and so forth. So that's all up in the air what he'll eventually do with it. He hasn't spent the night there. Because if he spent the night there, he would probably meet the hairy neighbors. So while I was living there by myself, I noticed that the horses would stay up, especially at night. They would stay up as close to where I was located, up to the trailer, as close as they could get. And I'd hear them run sometimes at night. In the dark, we didn't have any pole lights or anything like this, and we were to find out later that we should have had, and it might have made things easier. The Bigfoot had the perfect situation there because they had the local wildlife, they had the abundant deer and so forth, berries, fruit trees. They had all of that. They had a water source because they had the pond. We had nut trees, gooseberries, you name it. And the place was just crawling with life. It was nothing to see. Bobcats, quail, woodcock, and so forth like that. Well, I got myself busy putting out bird houses. I built bluebird boxes, and we had bluebirds. And I thought my mom would be so excited that, so I set about putting bluebird boxes in good places in the open. They like it open, but with a tree accessible. I checked into it, and I started building these bird boxes. Kept myself busy doing that, and put the bird boxes up, and things seemed to be going okay until the birds would nest in there, and then I would find the lids. And I screwed them down with screws, but the lids off of the houses the plywood would just be torn off. And I know that a raccoon, for example, people told me, maybe it's a raccoon. Well, they'll chew around the door. But I had gotten the plans for these boxes of how to make them almost predator proof. And I had followed from the Missouri Conservationist. And I had followed that to the T. So the birds had just enough room to get inside. It wasn't like we had a whole lot of sparrows or anything at the location. So they didn't have that problem, because they'll go in, they'll damage. People don't realize smaller birds like sparrows will get in a bluebird box and they'll destroy the nest and, eat the eggs and so forth like that. Well, I could see snakes, but snakes wouldn't rip the top off of the and I kept putting them higher up and greasing the pole and doing things like this. And I tried for several years, probably 3 to 4 years, to get these houses put up. Well, when Mom was coming home on the weekend, she would call my name. She would call out the back door or the front, wherever she thought I was at. She would call me to come in for lunch or something sometimes. And she would say, Carol, she had a specific sound to her voice, Carol, she would call me. And I might be all the way down to the pond, but, there's no city sound. There's no traffic. There's nothing, so you can hear it plainly. Well, I noticed whenever she was gone that I would hear, meow, meow, kind of like that. I thought, what the heck is that? Is that a woodpecker? Because sometimes they'll go like, they'll make nasal sounds,
So the sound was similar to her calling you, but not the actual words.
It was very similar to her calling, and over time, it got better. And it would be like, meow, meow. And then it would be, time passed, and it was, Carol. Like they were having the trouble with the beginning of the name, the Carol. They didn't get that out. It was like, meow, meow. Well, one day I went back there where the pond was. It was on the south border, and there's not real dense trees there. But considering the guy that had bought the place, not such a nice neighbor to have, and it was just brush. You could not see through the south fence. There was double fenced, and then the trees grew up in there. They were old trees. We just left it like that. And then he had a lot of stuff parked. He had a bus parked, in my view, so I couldn't see past the bus anyway. And this thing began to call from down in the woods below the pasture. And I was up on a stepladder. I was trying to reach as high as I possibly could to put this birdhouse up. And I had no idea that what I was dealing with was something that tall with arms that long. I had no idea that there's no way I could really put it up high enough, just myself. And so I had this beautiful house that I'd made for Mom, and I'd painted it with trailing vines and flowers and stuff to kind of camouflage it. And I was putting that up on the tree for her. And I kept hearing this, yarl, yarl. And I kept thinking, is somebody out here, is somebody calling a herald? Is it Harold? Or so I'm up in the tree, and I get glimpses of this thing coming through the brush at it. It was coming at, like, move a little way and then stop and hide itself, because I was up high on this oak tree trying to set this birdhouse and not break my neck. And I looked over to the south side, and I could see through the brush a little bit. There wasn't anything there. But when I looked up again to get down off of the ladder, I could see something black to dark standing there between the bus and the tree line that was between me and it. And I would say this was probably 15 feet at the most. And I tell you what, I about came unglued. I didn't want to come down from the ladder, and I didn't have a way. I'm not really physical to be able to climb up in a tree, and there wasn't really a way for me to do that. And I knew I'd break my neck if I tried.
Let me ask you now, is that the same area where the neighbor lady was attacked by one and, it was eating her intestines?
Yes, that was right up. That location? Yes, that was right up across the road from me. That would be at the front of the property, and I was further back on the property. And I was within range of seeing the trailer, but I wasn't that close to the road. I was back closer to the back of the property by where the pond is on the south pasture. And I looked through the trees, and I saw something swaying. And I thought, that's somebody in a ghillie suit or something, but it was a pretty hot day. And I thought, and all the brush was out on the trees. I couldn't get a real good look on this, but whatever it was exceedingly tall. And I looked back over there again when I got to the bottom of the ladder, and I just froze. And I thought, don't run, it won't help. And it stopped swaying, and it said, Carol, once. And I thought, I'm just going to vomit up my heart. I shut the ladder down, and I just started talking to myself. And I said, well, I'm happy to see you out here today, I guess. And I'm just going to be going back to the house now. You take it okay. You be okay. You be good boy or whatever. And I was falling over myself, getting my ladder and my tools and my things that I had brought a variety of things out there to hang it up with. I didn't know what I would need once I got there, so I had my little stuff to carry. And on my way up there, I dropped some of it, and I was dragging the ladder, and I couldn't get away from it fast enough. I got up to the pasture gate, and I bolted. I dropped everything I had. I did not care. I took off. I went inside, and I stayed inside for the rest of the day. And Mom didn't come home. She was working double shifts and stuff. And, she would get up for work at 3 a.m. and leave at 4. And then she would come home sometimes at 9 o'clock at night. And then she'd have a day off and make a longer weekend. But she would be spending it with my grandma because my grandma was ill. So I thought to myself, I don't want to do anything to encourage whatever this is. I was sure it wasn't a person, but they are always very, very good at hiding their face. You might see a shoulder, you might see hair, you might even see the top of its head, but they're very good at hiding the face. They'll always place themselves in a way that you might see them swaying through the brush, but you won't see the face. It's like, I got the impression it's like they felt like if the face was hidden, that you wouldn't, it's only nature to pick out eyes. If you see eyes, your brain will connect with that very well. And I kind of got the feeling that they would hide their face for that reason, somehow realizing that when they hide, that if they look at you with one eye and hide the rest of their face, that you're not likely to pick up on that. And we knew they were there because the first night we ever spent there, it was a terrible storm, and they were outside, out back, howling. We could hear one in particular howling, like sending up a howl, and it was a long time before we heard a return call. And when we did hear a return call, by then it was almost morning, and we'd pretty much, spent the night kind of fearful. We had a false sense of security in that little trailer. The first little trailer we had was a really old, beat-up little trailer patched together, and, it didn't have any insulation. You could have sneezed almost and, loosened a window. It was not very good. Later, we got a better one that was 16 by 80, which was much bigger. I was talking to you the other day about this stuff. I'm living in my mom's house that she got in 2017 right now after her death in 2020. And, Mom had trouble here with them coming to the house a few times that we knew for sure, for certain, that it was one of them that came to the house, because we saw tracks in the snow, the knuckle imprints. The first year, 2017, she put a Christmas tree up in her window. It's an old house, so there's just tall, narrow windows like houses used to have, and she put a little Christmas tree in there. And it was the first time that either of us had the windows not covered up, because we had lived out there for 20-some years, and we kept the windows shut. Even if you were dying with the heat and didn't have a fan, you would keep the windows covered, even in the daytime, because I've had some folks trying to tell me that they don't come out except at night. No. I've seen daytime sightings. That's when I've seen them, has been in the daytime. So they're active whenever, and I don't know if they take
and that's
turns,
true.
Being on sentry or what, but I've seen them. That's why I've had such good sightings with description as far as good goes. Good, not so good for me, but good for detail, because I've seen them in the daytime. Now, this was after the neighbor got attacked, and what we were talking about earlier about why do they chase a car? Why would they chase a motorcycle? I have a theory on this. They do not, from my experience, they do not like noise. They do not like loud noises. I think it may interfere with their hunt. That's, I haven't asked one of them what it is, and I'm not able to, and I won't do it. I'm not going to even pretend that I talk to them, because I don't. But here's the thing. This woman had hours, she worked at home, and she was able to go out all hours. She was alone, and by that point, nice neighbor, nice lady, she would go out, she had a lot of acreage there. She tried to keep like 20 acres of it cleared with a lawnmower, just a regular little lawnmower, small one, riding mower, and she would mow constantly, and she enjoyed being out at night. It's kind of nice. It's in the country. It always cooled down a little bit at night, and we had all those trees, and so did she. We were surrounded by trees at the time. She had a lot of trees in property that I don't even know if she's ever set foot on. But the coolness would come out of the shade at night and make it comfortable. She could open the windows, if you had nerve, you could pull it into your house and it would be, shut it back up in the morning. It would stay cool till, well past noon anyway, 2 o'clock, start cooking you about 4 o'clock. The western light, because we didn't have much shade on the western side, but it'd catch up with you. Well, she had gone out to talk to the neighbor man, and I may have told this before, but I'll tell you in short. She went out to the fence that divided his property from hers, and he had a pit bull that was it liked you or it didn't like you, and it liked her. And he opened the door, and the dog was faunching at the bit to get out the door. The dog ran around and up past it. He had some pasture. He had a couple of horses too. And the dog ran up, and only the dog could tell anyone what he saw. But what the man found when he caught up, she was on the ground. Her intestines were torn open. Her abdomen was slit. Not raggedy split, not teeth, but split like someone had used a knife and just cut her abdomen open, and it had been eating her intestines when he found her. He was able to call the ambulance, and thank God she survived it. But I had heard this from him, and I hadn't seen her around for some time. Now, I had seen the Bigfoot down on all fours, crawling through her grass. She raised, one of the farmers had her raising part of her front lot that had been a huge fence in for her dog originally. She found out she couldn't keep a dog there. They wouldn't let her keep a dog. I mean, these creatures. She would have a dog for a little while, and it'd start out bark, 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 just bark at anything. She'd get her a good dog to bark and let her know if someone was around. They weren't. But this dog would take off into the doghouse, and it wouldn't be any time, and the dog would be in the doghouse and would not want to come out of the doghouse, even to get watered and fed. This happened after one dog after another that she had. She would come up with a big dog that would be a good barking dog, and then it would be whipped, and it would be afraid, and it wouldn't do. She would tell me, I can't figure out why I get a dog. It's a good dog for a week or two, and then it's not a good dog. Well, as I said, she was out there mowing every night. She had lights on it, and she would mow in the darkness. Sometimes I'd tell my mom, I'd say, my gosh, it's 11:30. She's still out there mowing. And we would talk about it sometimes and say, do you suppose she's never seen one of these creatures? Do you suppose she doesn't know they're around? Or what? Because you couldn't pay us to sit. We wouldn't even sit out at our swing at night. And sure enough, when I found out that this happened to her, I went up to see her. And she had had some time to heal by then, and she showed me her scars. And the woman nearly lost her life. She said to my mother and I came to. She said something knocked me to the ground. Like it was effortless for whatever it was. It just knocked me to the ground. She said I was laying in that tall blue stem grass. She said by the fence. She said the next thing I know, I came to and I opened my eyes and it was hunkered over me. She said it was enormous. I don't know what it was. I said, what color was its hair? She said it was hairy. It was all black. She said it was putting my intestines in its mouth and chewing. And she said it didn't have much of a muzzle. I didn't see any ears sticking up. They tried to tell me at the hospital that it was a big dog because you wouldn't see a bear where I live. You wouldn't see it. Maybe at one time there was, and they're planning for us to have those again. They've already got a program where they're seeding bears all across Missouri. It's like, oh, great, something else to eat my strawberries. But anyway, I think that they got bent out of shape with her for running the lawn tractor at all hours.
Hey, Carol?
And, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is David. Didn't you say that at one point that her mower or somebody's mower had been moved or turned over during the night? Was it her?
That may have happened to her. She kept telling me she had problems with it and had dents on it and couldn't explain it and stuff like that. And she continued to mow after she got well. She continued to mow. And then her tractor broke down, and she couldn't afford to replace it for a long time. And she tried to hire a man to come out and mow, and he didn't mow very many times. And then he told her he wouldn't come back. Didn't explain why. I don't know why. My mother was down by the pond, and she was mowing, and, you know, it was really, we bit off more than we could chew. Really, we did. With her with a full-time job and stuff, we bit off more than we could chew, but we hadn't got that through our heads yet. We were younger, and we hadn't figured it out yet, but we wanted to stay there so badly. And so she had the mower, and she was mowing, and it ran out of gas. Well, she came walking up to me from the back pasture, and I met her, and I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "Oh, I ran out of gas." And I said, "Where is it? Is it by the pond?" And she said, "Yeah, it's a few feet away from the pond." She said, "It'll be okay. Nobody will bother it." I mean, you never saw anybody. We never had anybody tamper with anything. Even locals, you know, "What road do you live on?" And they, "Oh, I've lived here all my life. I've never been down that road." It's just you didn't see. You could go all freaking day and not see a car. Well, she came up here, we went to bed, and the next day she was at work, and I came out to see what was going on. And with the mower, I thought, well, you know, I'll go down and, you know, I can't remember if I had some gas by then or not. I can't remember if I did. But this seemed like it was the very next day. I walked down there, no mower. And then I realized it was thrown in the pond. It was upside down in the pond. Now, I don't know who could pick up a mower and toss it in the pond. We thought about it all different ways. We finally had a farmer come down and hook onto it and use his tractor and pull it out of there. But it was upside down in the pond. So, you know, not close enough for her to have rolled it or for anything to have happened. There's literally no other explanation for it being in the pond. But we had other things happen where we got clubbed. My mother got clubbed quite painfully. She got clubbed when she was outside. We'd been mowing one day, and she she loved being there. She didn't know some of the stuff that was going on. It was beginning to dawn on me. You know, from the day we heard them howl at night, I turned to her, and our eyes got big, and I said, "You know what that is?" Because we had heard that before when we saw one before when we went down to the Pomme de Terre to camp. So we had heard that before. I mean, there was no doubt. And I said, "You know what that is?" I mean, our hair crawled and our eyes got big. We knew what it was. No doubt. And I would hear something that sounded like in the woods off there to my northeast. It sounded like somebody chopping wood all the time. And I used to think to myself, why in the devil would someone be outside there chopping wood in the woods? If you're going to chop wood, you chop wood when you can see. Why would you go out there alone and chop wood in the dark? Well, it was them like wood knocking, I guess, but sometimes to me it sounded a lot like an axe, like a hatchet, cutting up wood. And, all of these little things were happening. We had weird stuff go on with our groceries. You set your groceries down, you go in the house to answer the phone, you come out, and all the lids are popped off of the cans that have the pop-up tops, and the cans are empty. We just had, weird stuff like that. Well, what I was talking to Will about was we've had a lot of rain, a lot of wind damage in this area lately, and I had to have a tree limb taken off of my deck. I mean, it didn't hit the car, it didn't hit the house, but it sure did a number on my, if I'd have been out there 5 minutes earlier, it would have nailed me. I mean, I wouldn't be talking to you now, so I think it's a God thing, but I give him the credit for that. But, it's kind of died down, them coming to town. They would never come to town during the daytime that I ever knew of, but they would come to her house after she moved out in 2017. They would come into town, and I say they. I'm not saying a family came to visit. I'm saying one, there would be, like for example, in springtime, we would find little bundles. When I say little, they're not really that small, like the size of a dinner plate. We find bundles of the little early spring growth broken off of our maple tree, and it would be in little stacks, little piles, and it would be broken off higher than I've got cousins that are like 7 feet tall. They couldn't reach it. So it's like, it looked like, to me, the ends looked like they were snipped off, like someone took their teeth and snipped them off. And I'm telling Mom at the time, like, for example, when it stood outside of her window in 2017 and there were marks in the snow where it had stood with its, put its knuckles in front of itself and looked in the window at her Christmas tree. That was the first time we had a window open of any kind, because, we had everything you could put, blinds. When first moved in, she didn't have enough curtains. We hung everything from beach towels to blankets because we just so freaked out about anything looking in the house.
Was that the time period they were urinating on her car?
Yes, and they'd come into town and they would mark her car. I say they, probably one of them, would come into town and pee on her car, pee on the glass up high, and let it run down over the car handles and drip off the car. And it's kind of hard to tell what it is, but I took lots of pictures of them peeing on the hood and peeing on the door handles. And they'd always pee where you handled the car, like on the front of the hood where we had the hood up and handled the hood to service the car. They'd pee on that. And then we had windshield wipers replaced, and they peed on those. And they would pee on both sides of the car at the car handles, not the back door. We didn't use the back doors on the car very often, or the hatch, but they would pee where the car handles were. They started that before we ever left the place. And one of them came, this was like the end of June she got the house in June. So this happened like the following June. So this was 2018 in June. And I remember it because they was quieting down around 4th of July. People around here are big on fireworks, and you don't see them around. You don't see them in July very, very much, because that's been my experience over the years. They don't like that sound. A lot of the guys have the cannons, the sound cannons for the fields and stuff to keep the critters out of the crop, They don't like that. I don't like it. And I think that they didn't like that woman mowing all the time, mowing at night. We were the nicest. They'll never have as nice neighbors when we lived there. They'll never have that nice of neighbors again, because we got aware of it right off the bat. And we would watch each other's back, or try to, when we mowed, whatever. Like I started to say before, my mother would say, "Oh, no, you go on in." I'd say, "Mom, I'm using the bathroom." And she'd say, "Well, okay, I'm going to stay out here, and I'm going to continue to pick up sticks," or what, because, there's no end of it. When you got 5 acres of trees, there's no end to picking up sticks. So I told her, I said, "Well, you finish up there and you get in here," because I'd seen more than she had. And she didn't listen to me. She's kind of hard-headed and wanted to do what she wanted to do. By golly, she paid taxes on that place and bought it, and she wanted to enjoy it. Well, pretty soon, I went from the restroom to the bedroom, and I was near the window, and I heard her cry out. So I went running out. I was trying to do supper, too, at the same time, trying to get her to come in to get supper, and she wouldn't do it. Well, while she was out there, one of them clubbed her, and it was no tiny stick either. It wasn't a fresh break, but they had found some fallen wood or something. It was already dried out, but it was big. It was hardwood, and they threw that. And I didn't have any hardwood in the front yard. That's the thing. They had to have carried it from somewhere else because we didn't have hardwood in that part of the yard from the north border all the way south across the front yard. We had some elm and stuff, but we didn't have any hardwood. And I mean, they clobbered the snot out of her. And she was on the ground when I came out. And she said, she was crying. And I said, what happened? And she said, I don't know what happened. I guess a stick fell out of the tree. Well, at first, that's what she thought. And I, got her inside. And she was, left some welts on her. And I said, no, looking under her top and stuff and trying to see if there was any broken skin. And what it had done is Mom's back was arched. She was born with a vertebra missing in her neck and stuff. So her back, her shoulders slumped. She had a curved back. And they had hit her in a way that it's like, she said she heard it come like whoosh, whoosh, whoosh through the air like that. So it made me think they threw it overhand, and it hit her between the shoulder blades and the back of her head at the same time. It was long. It was a big stick. And they had to have done it from being just over the fence in the north pasture, or the corner of the south pasture there, because they could hide behind. There were a few trees, and we had a swing set there, and it came from behind there. So she got clobbered that time, and they did things to her constantly. And she got tripped on the way out to work. We got afraid of her going out to work because we didn't have lights. And we had a pole light there, but a power pole in the front yard, but we didn't have a light installed. Mom was so afraid of what something would cost. She was used to being very, very frugal. So she would go out to work, and she would carry her lunch on her left arm. Always. Same thing. Creature of habit. She would carry her purse on her right arm and on the elbow and have that, she liked those zip-up bags that they're made out of nylon and in thermal kind of things. And she would take plenty of food because, she would be doing lunch and a break and be there all day. She would take off the front steps, and she never did want to bother me. She didn't want to wake me up. But I got to the point where after she got shoved, and it was always from the left and kind of from behind. She never did see what was doing it. Something would shove her, and she wouldn't stop falling until she took out the skirting on the trailer. She would hit the skirting with her body and take it out. She damaged her knees. She damaged her shoulders. She tore her rotator cuffs. This happened over and over again, and she wasn't tripping on. We looked it over every way you could think, and the only thing we could think of is we had a big, big tree, like a triple trunk tree in the front yard, right on the edge of the road, and she would walk by that to go to the car. And there was a second tree there and some large bushes, too. So, I don't know, but something was coming up on her. Here's the weird part. When I would get up and I would stand at the door in plain sight, and I would keep the trip light. We had a funky trip light that wouldn't stay, she had to walk all the way out to the car and it wouldn't stay tripped. So I'd stand there with my hand and trip it for her And the whole time that I did that, she never had one problem. She wasn't stumbling on anything. She wasn't stubbing her toe and falling on anything. Nothing happened. And then whenever I would sleep late for whatever reason, I wouldn't be up with her, something would happen to her. I found one of the bags that she had that had really heavy duty zippers in it, and it was sewn nylon. It's a really strong little thing with a nylon strap. And I found that literally pulled, stitch from stitch. It was pulled apart at the seams, and all the food was gone in it. And the plastic it was wrapped in, looked like it had been chewed up and spat out or something. But that was the weird thing. If this was a homeless person, why didn't they unzip the zippers? I don't know of any person in North America that wouldn't know how to unzip a zipper. I don't know that I've ever met anyone that couldn't unzip a zipper. That was the weird thing, is it was always, she always had the lunch on the elbow, and the lunch bag would be gone. I'd go out. Sometimes I'd hear her trying to come back into the house. She'd be crying. I would, hear her and get out of bed, and I'd go to her, and she would say, "My lunch, I can't find my lunch." And I'd go out there with a flashlight, and I would look all around, and there was no lunch there. And I would say, "Well, that's weird." I'd say, "Do you have money for lunch at work?" Or sometimes I'd jump in and make her a new sandwich and try to put it in something different, and I'd walk her out to the car and put her in it. Well, some morning she'd come back and she'd go, "This is disgusting. It smells like a skunk waller out there." And I'd say, "Do you think they've been out there?" And she'd say, "Well, I can't figure out. I've got it all over me. I'm going to have to change clothes. I'm going to have to wash up. They're going to make me late." She'd be hopping mad. And I'd go out there with her with flashlight, and they urinated on the doors. I don't know if they were trying to mark the car associated with us, that was part of their territory, or what the deal was. It had to be something like that. But when she moved to town, she took the same car with her. I didn't have a car out there. So I wouldn't know if I'd had one and I was using it, maybe they would have been peeing on my car too. I don't know. But she brought it to town, and they would come to town to pee on her car. Look in the windows. She had a kitchen window that was up high. Now, I measured it before. I'm 5'8". I can't look in the kitchen window, not even at the very bottom of it above the sink, because it's higher than I am tall. There was a face, impression of a face, a humongous face, a hairy face. It looked like it had a mustache, a really scruffy. It was huge. It was bigger than a human being. And where the eyes should be, there was no detail around the eyes. Like the eyes were very sunken. The eyebrows would be pushed up against the glass, and the nose would be spread out and be a big print on the glass, and like it had greasy skin. And that would be all the way at the top of the window up near the rain gutter on the house. And it was when you're standing at the sink, I went to the sink one day and I looked up, and that face was in the very corner of the upper pane of glass in her kitchen window. And I showed it to her. And there really wasn't a way for me to get a photograph of it. I went outside and looked at it, and was inside and looked at it. And, she started having trouble with her trash right off the bat. And I got to know some of the neighbors. I was, just beginning to get to know some of them and asking them. The guy next door had a big dog that barked. I mean, it didn't matter who did what, where she would come out of her house, this big dog would bark at her. Big Brennel, dog. I mean, that dog was a tank. And I noticed that after she'd been there for a little while, that dog would shut up and would not, at night, when I was here at night with Mom, that dog would not say peep. That dog could not get far enough in the corner away from our property line. It's just weird stuff like that. Well, finally getting to what I was going to say about the sticks. Okay? This would have taken place, it was before COVID, so, and it was after Mom got the house, so it was either it'd be July. This took place in July, so it'd either be 2018 or 2019 for certain. One or the other. And I can't just be real clear about it. I know I was thinking that I had already begun to get rid of the trash dumpsters I stayed with the 5 acres. I wanted rid of the dumpsters because they came regularly and dumpster dove, looking for food. They had dumpster dove so much, Will, that they had gotten dirty and greasy, whatever, and they would climb in and out, put their feet and their knees up against the inside and the outside of the dumpster and had their handprints. They'd get their hands dirty in there tearing up bags and then climb out and sometimes leave handprints on the dumpster. And the knee, but you could see where they had pushed their knee up against the inside wall to like kind of steady themselves as they stepped out. It was just plain step in and out of it. It was no problem for them. I mean, I'm talking the biggest dumpster because I had a lot of old farm equipment and junk and sheds and you name it, 20 years worth of living there, mowers that didn't work, parts and stuff like that to get rid of. And I found someone that wanted metal scrap, and it got me closer to my goal. My goal was I had been talking to your organization and getting tips on what I could do. There is help out there. There are things you can do to discourage them. And I was so happy, so elated to find that out. So I was I'd had a pole light put in. I hadn't gotten rid of the trash yet. So the dumpster was sitting there, and I had spent the day with Mom. This was before the 4th of July. And it was like the days leading up to, it was July leading up to 4th of July. And so I told her, I said, you can't do like we did out in the country. You've got sticks or something to burn. You can just burn it out in the country. As long as there's not a burn ban that day, you can burn it. I said, you're going to get turned in. Sure enough, she got turned in for having sticks in town. What's the matter? Oh, got turned in. The grass is 8 inches. And it was different than living in the country, of course. So I told her, I said, I'm going to have to get rid of your sticks. And she goes, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, according to the paper that they gave us, it's the size of a small phone book with all the ordinances. We can't burn it here because they wanted 25 feet from any road, 25 feet from any car, 25 feet from any building, and her lot didn't fit the dimensions. There was nowhere to put it on the property where it wouldn't be by a car going by or the neighbors parked cars. There was no way to burn it in town and do it safely. I mean, yeah, you could roast a weenie, but I'm talking she had, most people's living rooms aren't quite as big as this pile of sticks that we had because we just had a lot of deadwood down and stuff. Not that many trees, but it can sure produce a lot of deadwood. So I took that wood and I cut it up in lengths like no longer than 3 feet long. And she asked me what I was doing, and she really wasn't able to, was not able to do that with me. So I got it in bundles, and I said, you got some twine? So I got some twine and tied these bundles up, nice, neat little bundles, because I knew she'd have a cow when I told her what my plan was. So she said, what are you going to do with it now that you've got it all bundled? And I'm talking a few days. It took me time to get this all cut and bundled. So I said, well, I don't know anybody that wants sticks. And we laughed about it. And I said, well, here's what we can do. I said, when you take me back tonight to the farm, why don't you let me put these in the back of your Ford Escape? And she goes, no, we're not going there. I said, Mom, what else can you do? You've got so many days to make this right. And then if you get it made right, you won't pay a fine. You won't have to stand in court. She says, well, I know, we got to do that. And I said, no, I mean now, honey, they're giving you a week. She says, well, okay. So I opened the back of her car up and I threw some old rugs and stuff I had to protect the flooring in her car, and I put the back seats down and I I filled her up. So when I got ready, I called her and she said, well, let's eat something, then I'll take you out. So we did that. And it was getting late by the time we got through eating. I said, I'm going to unload this tonight. She said, I don't think you should. It's getting dark. And I said, well, I'm going to put it between the dumpster and the road. I'm just going to stack it right there. She goes, well, why not throw it in the dumpster? I said, because I'm in the country, I can burn it. She said, oh. So, you know, I knew those things came to the dumpster all the time, but I was trying really hard. I mean, I was eating SpaghettiOs and trying to put the, you know, the little can. I was trying to wrap all my trash up, and when I went to Mom's house, I was putting all my food trash in her trash in town, not living there, but it was not an easy way to live. I was work all day trying to clear stuff out and throw it in the dumpster, and they weren't finding a whole lot to eat in there, so, you know, they didn't seem too happy about that. They were more active and more aggressive. And so I put the sticks right by it, and she had her headlights on so I could see what I was doing. I got them there, and I'm trying to think if she spent the night with me or if she just seemed like I didn't want her to drive home in the dark in case she'd have car trouble or something. You know, I just didn't need to be. She didn't need to rush home for anything. So I said, well, why don't you just stay here the night? Seemed like she said yes. I finally talked her into it. The next morning, I went out there early and to get started before it got hot. Every one of those bundles of sticks was gone. I thought, well, that's odd. I thought, everybody that lives out here where I live, they've all got brush and deadfall, you know, everywhere. Why would they come to my house to pick up twigs to get, you know, maybe for their cookout or something? But then I got to looking, and the ground was pretty dry. It was July. And I saw where something had come back and forth and got these sticks. Something came there through the grass, mashed it down, left a trail, left a big steaming poo-poo pile right there in my front yard. Yes, they made certain they poo-pooed in my front yard. They had the whole back to themselves, but they'd poo right in my front yard, right where I would walk normally. Big steaming poo pile and this big path, and they just step over. They don't have to use the gates or nothing. They just step. They're tall. They just step right over the fence. Had barbed wire fence back there. Didn't faze them. They just step right over that and continue the path. And that was another thing that I noticed, that it wouldn't be a human being living in my woods, you know, like maybe a homeless person or something, because no homeless person I know would want to try to step over a high barbed wire fence like that. When right next to the gate, when they could just, the gate was always, you know, easy to unlatch and open. I don't know why they didn't just go through the gate. If it was a person going back down to a homeless camp, maybe they had a tent or something back there. So I followed that. I opened the gate and I followed back, and I walked as far as I dared, and it went past the pond and over the berm of the pond and over the fence and into the desolate brush. We called it the desolate zone. We didn't go back there. You know, after I learned my lesson, I quit going back there altogether. Bone piles and, you know, horrible odor, and you could tell that they were staying back there as a family unit, in other words. Signs of activity, and I got enough of that. I didn't want to go back there anymore. So anyway, about the sticks. My question to Will is, what does he think that they might be able to do with sticks? Because I'm like you all. I never saw any proof of them having much dexterity. It's not that they can't. They've got sheer brute force, and they're capable of popping the top on a can of apricots and pulling the lid off. I've seen them open things that they just shouldn't be able to open unless they're just something that's got a set of fingers and a thumb, like a primate, that can do things that, your standard little critters can't do. My thought is that maybe they carry them back and use them as bedding. But if anyone has any idea, I'm curious to know if anyone's ever seen anything like that.
Carol, I've seen them where they carry things off. What they do with them, though, I couldn't tell you. I guess we should go around the panel for everybody's thoughts. Forrest, what do you think?
About what specifically?
About what they might be doing with bundles of brush, like bundles of sticks.
They do knock on trees.
Well,
they're tree knockers.
That's Anita here in the background.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, are you finding it elsewhere? I mean, are you finding it piled up someplace?
I never did go back in there because by that time I was scared shitless.
Well, Will, do you remember when Adam was here and we went around the back and I'd had, PEC had come in here and cleared a path because they put me a pole up out here for a pole light, another one, that's like, about 60 feet from the back of the house. And I actually have two pole lights out here, one that's right next to the house and then one that's about 60 feet away. But they had put they were running lines through here. And so they had to clear a path to put these lines in and then one over from my neighbor here. And so they had pushed up a big wall of brush, and that wall of brush must have been, I'm not exaggerating, it must have been 20 feet high. I mean, it was, and when, well, yeah, and I don't know if you heard Anita in the background, she says the stuff's still there, but it's, at least as far as we can tell, it's still there, but it's all spread out. Yeah. It wasn't like that before. And I had not gone back there until Adam was here, and we walked around back there, and all of a sudden Jessica and I both are going, wait a minute, this is like half the height that it used to be. And of course I can't get up on it. You have to kind of climb up on it. It's probably about 6 feet high, and I can't climb up on it, but you can't even get around it. It's like it's completely blocking the whole, a whole area up there.
Well, it sounds real similar to if you look, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say maybe they're taking it and using it to do the same thing that obviously somebody took this down, and I was like, I didn't do this, and I didn't have anybody else do this, so how did this happen? And I just kind of felt silly when I'm walking by it, and all of a sudden I'm realizing, wait a minute, this is half the height that it used to be. Or in fact, it's less than half the height that it used to be. So, how did this happen?
Well, in our film Bigfoot Evidence Oregon, there's a section in there where Tom's friend Kurt found this, what we determined it to be was an ambush site, because what they did, somebody just out walking through the brush would look at this and say, it's just brush, right? But what it was, you could see by where the trees were snapped and they were placed along this game trail where deer would come along and it would stop them. So in that case, it was easy once you really started looking at it and figuring out where the breaks were and how the stuff was placed, that's what they were doing with it. So maybe they're taking it and making it into some kind of an ambush point.
Yeah.
That's possible.
You did the same thing in the Army. You just funnel them into where you want them to go.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yeah, you're creating a channel.
Unless the area they're staying in might be marshy or muddy, they could be using it as some type of bedding to sit on, or depending on the type of tree, it could be something medicinal.
It's really hard telling unless you find where they've actually taken it, and then you can see what they're doing with it.
Yeah.
I know, and I just was too chicken poop to go back there.
I don't blame you.
Well, you
Well,
know,
that's
what Dave just said really, you know, rings to me. Maybe they have hidden places in the swamps and bogs and areas where they go to rest, where they don't have to worry about things, you know.
Uh-huh. Now, let me tell you, the two
Maybe
comments,
they have places like that.
the last two comments makes a lot of sense to me, too, that I hadn't thought of, because the back of the property is cut through from, well, there's a drainage. I've got a lot of farmer land around me, and mine is in trees, but on the north side, there's just a cornfield there. And at the time, at this time, the neighbor had been run out, and they had sold the property to somebody else, and they had already cleaned the property up. So all the cars and buses and stuff that were there were gone by the time this happened. Well, on the north border of the property between the cornfield and my property was a drainage, and it would drain I was kind of at the valley end of, in other words, the land to my west was all uphill, and if you went north, it was uphill, and behind me, it went uphill. It went back uphill to the east, but between the back of my property and all of that drainage, it had to go somewhere, right? So it went along my north boundary, and then it swung in a little bit, curved in through the trees, and that was a place I felt like they ambushed deer there a lot, because there were a lot of bones and stuff back there. But it would drop off, and I'm not kidding, it went from a small ditch to, I've been down in it before, it looked like rooms. It looked like someone had shoveled out rooms. I can't imagine. I know the water can do a lot, but comparing the rest of the ditch to that was just unreal. I mean, seriously, you could have dropped a few trucks in there and they would have been swallowed up. It was big. And I noticed that because, I very foolishly, I took the dog with me a lot. Not that the dog would protect me. It was a Pomeranian, for pity's sake, but he really loved to go out and walk. I mean, you could say walk, and he wouldn't shut up barking. He loved to go walking. So I would take Herman with me and walk in on the edges of the cornfield and then drop down into that gully sometimes. I just wanted to see. I was curious. And I thought it's practically rockless. They had to be getting the rock that they threw at us. They had to be getting it from the road almost, because our property was practically rockless. So, I dropped down in there, and first there'd be a place where they had just pushed an old farmhouse. Well, the lady disappeared. Don't know what happened to her. I know what the talk is, but she lived there alone. They called her the goat lady, and she lived there prior to our ever purchasing. It's like 2 or 3 owners prior. And when she didn't come back, when they couldn't find her, they went ahead and set up a funeral memorial for her and put a stone, but she's not there. Okay, so they pushed her house and all the old, she had 1920s stuff at her house, farm stuff. They pushed it down in that gully. So there's an area there that you can't get into it because it's full of, old equipment and wheels and good grief. There's everything down there. But if you went around that and then dropped down in it again, found a place that was safe enough you could jump down in there, you literally would walk heading south back toward the road. It would be like a big, like as big as the bedroom. It's as big as rooms in there, and as deep as a room is from floor to ceiling. Every bit as deep Some of them were a little bit deeper. And just as slick as a whistle in there, nothing really like you would think, mud, just a mud bottom with very few pebbles in there, just not a lot of rock in this area. And literally, you could be in one section, a room-sized section, and not be able to see into the next section. It was cut zigzag so that if you left one area, you'd go to the left, like the first room that you drop down in. The way out is to the left, and it's a passage where it's hard to explain. It's a zigzag feature so that you can't see all the way to the end of it. You go in one room at a time, and the place that you get out of that room is going to vary from left to right, left to right, left to right. That many of these large rooms back there. It was just exceedingly creepy. It stunk. When I would take the dog back there, I heard things once in a while. I heard some stuff and I smelled stuff, but I didn't really, I didn't have an encounter, a face-to-face encounter. I saw some young ones up in a tree one time, which was amazing to me. I wish I would have had my camera with me, but they would go from tree to tree, and these really large mature trees that were there at the time. They jumped from tree to tree, and it was quite a distance from one tree to another, and they were small. They were smaller, easily as big as a chimp, I would say, or a little bit bigger, and longer legs, longer hind legs, and wrap those, this sounds insane, I know, but wrap their legs around the tree and just shimmy themselves around to the back side of the tree where you couldn't see it, and then jump to another tree. When you have your head turned, jump, and I see them out of the corner of my eye, jump from one tree to another, and then shimmy around to the back side of the tree where you couldn't see them. I saw two of them in the trees that day, one day, doing that. But my dog was my warning system. My dog would just completely fall over, and like he was having I thought he was having seizures for a long time. I thought that, and the vet couldn't find anything wrong with him. He wouldn't do that in the house, and he wouldn't do it when we went up to the Kansas City property, and he wouldn't do it in town, but he would do it when we were back there in the woods. Or if he was out at night, we tried not to leave him out at night because of that. But if we would tether him up and then, run into town and come back and it was starting to get late, I'd always rush back there to go get him. He was real barky when we first brought him down there, and he got to the point where he wouldn't bark at anything. And you bring him in at night, and he would have his sometimes, not every time, but sometimes he would have his fur all smoothed down, and he would stink. He'd be kind of oily, like greasy, and his fur would be slicked down like something had been stroking his fur. I know this sounds like I need to be in a nut ward somewhere, but you'd bring him in, and he would smell like them so badly, and, didn't see them do it, but like I said, there were just strange things that happened. Like one time I decided I was going to spread sand out. We were going to put down blocks and extend our area that we had a swing. We were going to extend that and make a nice little area for the blocks, for your feet, so you wouldn't be swinging with your feet on mud and all that. And so I had bags of sand there, and I was going to spread it there anyway. So I got my level out, got my boards out, and I spread that sand real broad, where I knew no human being could reach over there toward the center. And at the center of the thing, I put a little goodie of food. I can't remember what I put there, but I put something there from the trash that was food. And the next morning, gone, but no tracks in the sand. And then the next time I did it, there were all kinds of animal tracks, like raccoon, possum, and like that. And so that was really no good because I just told myself, well, one of them got the food. I can't be sure something got the food. But on the nights whenever the food would be completely gone, there wouldn't be any tracks of any kind of animal. Like, I got the feeling that the other animals sensed or smelled that they were there and would not come. Well, like, for example, one time my mom worked also on the weekends. She worked cleaning churches, and I worked with her. And she would a lot of times do that as a favor to the churches. She couldn't give an offering, but that was her way of helping out with like 3 different churches that she would clean if they needed it. Like their cleaning lady, was ill and couldn't go or whatever. Mom would step in. We would go do that. So we brought home a full-sized, the biggest sheet cake you ever saw with white frosting on it. They'd had a wedding at one of the churches, and they had a 5-gallon container of frozen strawberries, and it had been set out and forgotten and left to thaw, and so it was beginning to ferment. I don't know if I told you about the cake and the strawberries before, but so Mom said, well, what are we going to do with this? And the church didn't have, that particular church didn't have trash pickup. The lady that cleaned it she would normally do it, but she's like in her 90s, and she wasn't well. So my mom said, well, let's just take this home and put it in the trash. And, my eyes got big, and I said, well, what's going to happen to it if you put it in the trash? And she said, what? And I said, Mom, you know what lives out there. And she goes, yeah, you're right. Maybe I shouldn't take it. I said, yeah, but they're going to have church in the morning, and that's sitting out on a counter like this. I said, that's a shame. They must have had something happen that they didn't, or they must have ordered too much food for it or something, or maybe they made their own and they didn't need it. And we found out later that they'd stuck the cake in the refrigerator for whoever came up there could have it, and they didn't have any takers. But the strawberries, believe me, they were fermented. So we loaded the stuff up in the car and got it home, and we still had a dumpster. Mom still lived there. I said, I'm going to do something a little bit different. She said, what's that? And I said, I'm going to put it on the far side of the dumpster so that the neighbor's light does not illuminate it at all, because by then the neighbor lady, she was freaked out, and she was putting up lights everywhere. So I said, let's put it on the back side of there and see if they come up from behind. See, they could leave the pasture. They were doing this at the time. Leave the pasture, go behind a shed, go behind our camper truck, go behind our K-Yacht camper, and then steal up underneath the hedge trees and then get to the dumpster. Then they would go back that way and step over the fence, and away they'd go. And they were trying to do this in a way that they could be the most sheltered and not be seen from my bedroom window, because believe me, by this point I was so curious I couldn't stand it. So I set the full cake down. I set the container of strawberries there, and I took the lid off and set them there on the ground together. And so the next day, Mom had somewhere she had to be. She was gone. I went outside and I said, well, let's see what this is. The cake had been divided like with fingers, and it had been cut in half like with someone's hand, a big, big hand, and it had cut it in half. I could see some hair marks dragging through the frosting, because this was a perfectly smooth sheet cake, hair dragging through it, and they had devoured half of the sheet cake, and they had left half of the sheet cake, and they had cut it in two, they had cut it across crossways and eaten half the cake. And there was icing. There was kind of an icing mess there, but believe me, it must have been much appreciated, because that was slick gone. There wasn't a crumb in the grass anywhere.
I'm sure.
And so the strawberries were completely gone. I mean, there wasn't a drop of anything left in the can, and it was laying on its side. But it didn't get on the ground or wasn't anything. I'm taking notes by this time. I'm thinking, So Mom came later, and she picked me up, and we had somewhere we had to go. It seemed like we went to another town. It's like 40-something miles away just to get groceries. So we went to this little town to get groceries, and we came back, and we had taken a detour because it seemed like the road was out or closed or something like that. And so we took a detour. We came back another way. So we came in from the west. We had left going east. Now we come back from the west. So we top this hill, and we can see all of our property, the frontage. You know, you can't see back far, but you can see the frontage from this hill. So we come down this hill, and I poke my mom, and I go, look at that sucker. And she says, where at? And I go, look in the tree line. Look at the tree line by the rats. So that's what we called the neighbor. I'm sorry, but we did because he acted like one. I said, it's by the rats. Look by the rat's driveway. And there it stood, a Bigfoot, the one with the black hair, the one that I did the picture of him looking at me from the driveway, with a yellow eye. There he stood amongst the trees and the dark bark, and he was standing right up in there with those trees, and he just blended in so perfectly. And as we got close, we had to slow down and take a left, right? And we're getting closer to him as we come. He's looking right at us, and he's beginning to sway. And I'm telling Mom, I said, you know what? Let's don't even stop. I don't even know what he's planning to do. Just look right at the car, and he comes leaning in toward us as we pull up, and he looks happy. What I mean by happy is he had body language, wiggling his body like a happy dog. When a dog is happy to see you, his body wiggled. His torso wiggled. I mean, not big, and he doesn't have a tail, but he wiggled his body as we came up, and he leaned out toward us, and he looked more than happy. And I'm thinking, you son of a gun, you got 5 gallons of fermented strawberries down you. That's what you got. And so my mom laid on the gas, and we dusted him. We went right by. And she goes, well, where are we going? I go, I don't know, but I'm not going home with that thing in the front yard. And it was standing right in the tree line. It wasn't more than, say, 20, 25 feet from the road. And that's my craziest experience with them. But, and, of course, we left the cake there, and I noticed that nothing else ate on that cake. I didn't see raccoon tracks. I didn't see any proof of anything else, and I'm looking for proof. Well, something came the third night, wasn't the second night. Nothing touched it the second night, which is highly weird because there's a plethora of critters that would like to have cake, and none of them touched it. I mean, you would think there would be tracks, at least tracks in the frosting where they were, feeding on it. And there was none of that. And then the other half was gone. This is like the third night, and I checked it, and it was gone. So, I don't know.
Guys, I hate to tell you we're out of time, but let's go around and, any questions or comments, everybody? That's really fascinating, Carol.
I hope to never see it again, but the whole subject fascinates me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. I will tell anybody that will listen to me to be careful that don't go hunting these things up.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, what do you think? Let's go around the table. David, we'll start with you.
Carol, fascinating updates as usual. You're always welcome. Stay in touch with us. We'll have to have you back on.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Tracy, how about you?
I apologize. I got strangled on some tea a few minutes ago.
You're out in that mower again, aren't you?
No, he needs to quit looking at those Sasquatch pictures.
Oh, that's what it is. He's looking at Bigfoot porn.
I went to take a sip of tea, and right about the time I turned it up, I caught a coughing spasm, and I think I inhaled about half of that damn tea.
Oh, that's no fun.
Yeah, I had to run out the front door. I didn't want to yak on my wife's carpet. She'd pitch a fit about that. So, But yeah, I missed part of the conversation. I'm sorry about that, but that was just one of them things that happened. No, I've talked to Miss Carol before and gone over a lot of that. I'm glad to hear her her update and everything. Just want to tell Miss Carol, stay in touch with me. I lost all my phone numbers a while back because of my own stupidity. So just send me a text and call so I can get your number again, please.
Okay.
Forrest, how about you? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say I can't talk anymore.
Oh, okay. Forrest, then how about you?
Well, as usual, Carol's stories are always, very, very interesting and intriguing. Carol, you can call me anytime. She sent me these brownies, pictures of these Sasquatch brownies. You had got to. I don't know if you sent those to the guys, but oh my God, they actually look delicious.
No, I didn't.
Oh my God, I get all the recipes. I get the recipes, guys. Y'all are just SOL.
I use red hots for the eyes. I cut them. I had this little half pan of brownies, and I got invited to a Halloween party, and I'm like, oh, I don't have anything to take. And the woman says, oh, just bring anything. And I thought, okay, this is anything. At least it's still edible. So
yeah, they look like little Sasquatch heads.
I had these little brownies, and I cut them like triangles, and I looked around to see what I had to kind of dress them up a little bit. And I took pecans and red hots and German chocolate coconut brown. Frosting. It was brown chocolate caramel coconut frosting. And I frosted them, and I made them into ugly little Bigfoots. Little Bigfoot faces. It's like Bigfoot faces, of course, And I took them to that party, and someone was standing there eating them and said, wow, you'd think that you'd even seen one of these creatures. And I went, yeah, you think so. I came home with empty containers, so they must have tasted it.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thanks again, Carol, for joining us, and absolutely keep us updated and stay in touch.
Okay, thanks for including me.
All right, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for stopping by, everyone.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.